Well, the UN Special Envoy for Syria is calling on Israel to stop its attacks in Syria and Middle Eastern countries are also accusing Israel of exploiting Syria's instability to execute a new land grab. I want to discuss these Israeli strikes in further detail. We've got retired Air Force Colonel and CNN military analyst Cedric Layton joining us now. Cedric, always good to speak to you. News coming in, and just the latest from the Israeli Defense Force saying that they have destroyed Syria's naval fleet in an attempt to avert anyone of any weapons getting into the wrong hands. What is your initial response to this?
Well, it's quite an extraordinary situation, Eleni, and it's great to be with you. When you look at the Syrian naval fleet, it was a relatively small fleet, and we're not talking a major player in the Eastern Mediterranean in terms of naval forces. However, this is significant because the Syrian Navy was often used by Iran and its proxy Hezbollah to transfer weapons that originally came from Iran and then went through Syria and then were transshipped to places like Lebanon and then, of course, down to Gaza as well. Hamas also, I think, benefited from what they were able to transship that way. So in essence, the Syrian Navy was a bit of a support force for these efforts. They also supported the Russian naval presence in the Eastern Mediterranean, which still exists at Tartus. And that is, of course, significant. But the way in which the Israelis did this, it's very clear that they are trying to, in essence, zeroize, if you will, the Syrian military capability and to make it a much more different place when it comes to the military balance of power in the northern Middle East.
Yeah, Cedric, I mean, we're looking at pictures right now of the sheer destruction, the scale of the destruction of this naval fleet. Really incredible to see at a time where we're hearing about a lot of airstrikes into Syria. And of course, Israel says they're targeting military targets, they're targeting chemical weapons and so forth. I wonder, from a military perspective, what the rebel groups in Syria right now would be making of these attacks, and whether this is a concern for you.
Yeah, so this is, it's certainly a significant issue, Eleni, for the rebel forces, because now they are unable to take over what the Assad regime had built up in terms of their military capability. The Assad regime was a client state of not only Iran, but also of Russia. So a lot of the equipment that we see in these videos is actually originally Russian equipment that was either sold or donated to Syria over the last 50 years, really, of the Assad regime's rule. So from a rebel perspective, this does weaken their possible power from a military sense. Now, they would have some issues taking over these installations. They would have some issues taking over the naval fleet from the previous Syrian Navy because of training issues, personnel issues, loyalty issues, all of those factors. But now basically what the Israelis have done is they've, in essence, redrawn the baseline and made it very clear that they don't want the Syrians, in whatever form their government takes, to have this capability, this power projection capability, even though it's a small one.
Yeah, we're also hearing about airstrikes in Damascus, and there's a few things that are on the go right now, Cedric. We also know that some Arab nations have condemned what we're seeing right now in Syria, of course, the strikes by Israel. And then importantly, from a military objective perspective, what are you reading into this, and particularly that we're seeing strikes in Damascus?
Yeah, Damascus is, of course, the nerve center of all things government in Syria. When the Assad regime was in existence, they basically ruled out of Damascus, and that was in essence, their centralized node, the largest city. From an economic standpoint, second to Aleppo generally, but still a major place for everything to be run from. And so what has also happened during the Assad regime was they concentrated a lot of their military power, their research facilities, their storage facilities, some of their storage facilities for chemical weapons, for example, in the Damascus region. So what the Israelis are doing is they are in essence cleaning everything up from their perspective. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to make sure that whatever regime follows in Syria, that it cannot use the military assets that were part of Assad's arsenal. Those assets include not only the naval piece that we saw earlier, but specifically to Damascus, Air Force assets, which were concentrated in large measure around that city. And the other thing that they're trying to, of course, do is make sure that any type of unconventional weapon, whether it be a biological weapon or chemical weapons, which are believed to still have been held by the Assad regime, those they want to make sure that they cannot be employed in any way. We know that Assad, of course, employed these weapons against his people during several occasions during the Syrian civil war. And the rebel groups have interestingly given assurances that they do not want to use these chemical weapons either against their own people or in a foreign adversarial role. So they don't seem to be as perturbed by this, but of course they will clearly be perturbed by violations of Syrian sovereignty and issues like that, which clearly the Arab nations have complained about and are going to probably bring the United Nations in on that front as well.
Absolutely. We have heard from the UN Special Envoy to Syria. So Cedric Layton, Colonel, great to have you with us. Thank you so much.